The phrase, "the world abandons China in a spectacular display of loyalty to Donald Trump," appears to be a hyperbolic or satirical statement rather than a reflection of current global dynamics. Recent developments indicate a complex and multifaceted international response to President Trump's policies, particularly concerning China. Global reactions to Trump's tariff policies. President Donald Trump's administration has implemented aggressive tariff measures, notably imposing a 145% tariff on Chinese imports. While these actions have strained U.S. relations with key allies, they have also created opportunities for China to strengthen its global influence. China is actively engaging with countries and blocs such as the EU, ASEAN, Japan, and South Korea to redefine trade dynamics in its favor. However, Trump's tariff policies have also led to significant economic repercussions domestically. U.S. stock markets experienced steep losses, with the S&P 500 falling 3.45%, the Nasdaq dropping 4.31%, and the Dow Jones declining 2.54%. These market reactions reflect concerns over the potential for a recession and the impact of trade tensions on the global economy. China's strategic response. In response to U.S. tariffs, China has imposed its own tariffs on U.S. goods and is promoting itself as a stable, open market. The Chinese government is leveraging this position to attract countries seeking alternatives to U.S. trade relations. Additionally, China's state media has used nationalistic rhetoric to rally domestic support, drawing parallels between current trade conflicts and historical tensions. Perceptions of Trump in China. Interestingly, President Trump has garnered a complex reception within China. Some Chinese nationalists admire his strongman persona and conservative values, viewing him as a figure who inadvertently strengthens China's global position by undermining U.S. influence. This paradoxical admiration is reflected in the nickname Chuan Jiangwo, or Trump the Nation Builder, suggesting that his actions have, in some ways, benefited China. Global reactions, not exactly a united front. While some countries have aligned themselves more closely with the U.S. in specific policy areas, most of the world isn't blindly picking sides. Instead, they're playing a strategic balancing act. European Union. The EU has been critical of both Trump's unilateral tariffs and China's trade practices. Rather than abandoning China, the EU is trying to reduce dependency on both superpowers. Initiatives like de-risking from China show a shift toward more resilient supply chains, but not an outright economic divorce. Trade tensions have pushed the EU to explore deals with other Asian economies as well as Latin America and Africa. India is in a unique position. It's wary of China's regional dominance, yet cautious about becoming too entangled with the U.S. under Trump-style unpredictability. Delhi is focusing on economic self-reliance, Atmanirbhar Bharat, while quietly deepening defense ties with the West. Globe with meridians Southeast Asia, ASEAN. ASEAN nations are walking a tightrope, economically tied to China, but strategically inclined toward U.S. partnerships, especially in security. Countries like Vietnam and Indonesia are benefiting from companies moving production out of China, but they're not abandoning Beijing, just hedging their bets. Repeat button China's countermoves. Far from isolated, China is responding with a blend of hard and soft power. Economic diplomacy, pushing deeper into the global south through infrastructure, debt relief, and trade deals. RMB push, accelerating efforts to internationalize the yuan, reducing global reliance on the dollar. Media strategy. Chinese state media is portraying Trump's trade war as reckless U.S. aggression, solidifying nationalism at home and gaining sympathy abroad. They're also capitalizing on U.S. unpredictability by positioning themselves as a more stable long-term partner, particularly in Africa, Latin America, and parts of Eastern Europe. Brain strategic takeaway. So, the headline, "The world abandons China in a spectacular display of loyalty to Donald Trump," doesn't match reality. What's actually happening is geopolitical multipolarity is intensifying. Countries are trying to avoid being caught in a China binary. Economic pragmatism rules, loyalty is scarce, economic self-interest dominates. Global trust in U.S. consistency has wavered under Trump's tariff-first, ally-second approach. Global tech supply chains, a game of realignment. The tech sector is one of the biggest arenas where the U.S.-China rivalry plays out. Trump's aggressive tariffs and export controls have already shaken things up. Chart decreasing short-term disruption. U.S. companies like Apple, Nvidia, and Qualcomm face uncertainty with manufacturing partners in China. China is fast-tracking self-reliance in semiconductors and AI tech, pouring state funds into startups, labs, and education. In response to Trump's policies, many U.S. tech firms are China Plus One, ING, diversifying production to countries like Vietnam, India, and Mexico. Puzzle piece long-term strategy. The U.S. is pushing the CHIPS Act to rebuild domestic semiconductor production, a slow, expensive process. Meanwhile, China is weaponizing rare earth metals and supply chain choke points as leverage. So it's not just tariffs, this is a foundational tug-of-war over who dominates future technologies like AI, quantum computing, and 6G networks. Military and strategic alliances, quiet shifts, not loud loyalties. Trump's return to the world stage has global military planners recalibrating. NATO and the Pacific. Allies in Europe and the Indo-Pacific are uneasy, not necessarily disloyal to the U.S., but uncertain about its reliability under Trump. Japan and South Korea are quietly expanding their military autonomy. NATO countries are increasing defense budgets, not just because of Russia, but also to hedge against future U.S. unpredictability. China's strategy. China is deepening military cooperation with Russia and strengthening its maritime presence in the South China Sea. It's also testing regional alliances, e.g., with Iran and North Korea, to challenge U.S. dominance in key choke points. There's no mass defection to the U.S., what's happening is more subtle, a global push toward military self-reliance and regional hedging. Ballot box with ballot 2025 U.S. election implications. Trump's foreign policy posturing is also campaign material, and it's having international consequences. Allies are preparing for Trump 2.0 by building in Plan Bs for defense and trade, just in case his policies become more extreme. China, ironically, could benefit if Trump triggers more internal division in the West or if U.S. allies fragment over conflicting interests. If Trump pushes harder on America first, it might accelerate global decoupling, but not necessarily in a way that benefits the U.S. long term. Compass TLDR, what's really happening? Countries aren't loyal to Trump, they're strategically adjusting to the reality of a volatile superpower. China is not being abandoned, but it's facing a more cautious, skeptical world. We're entering a new era of economic nationalism, tech bifurcation, and multi-alignment, not a Trump-led global movement. Africa, pragmatic partnerships over politics. Africa isn't picking sides, it's picking projects. Wrench China's edge. Through the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, China has built roads, ports, and telecom infrastructure across the continent. Despite growing debt concerns, China remains Africa's largest bilateral trading partner and a top investor in natural resources and logistics. United States-U.S. approach under Trump. Trump-era policies focused more on countering China's influence than building strong Africa-focused initiatives. Recent rhetoric has been nationalist and transactional, not exactly winning hearts across African capitals. Brain the reality. African nations are engaging with both powers but pushing for better terms. Many are now diversifying, courting the EU, India, Turkey, and even Gulf countries to avoid over-reliance on either Washington or Beijing. Globe showing America's Latin America, looking beyond the hegemon. The U.S. historically viewed Latin America as its backyard. That's changing. China's silent rise. China has become the top trading partner for Brazil, Chile, and Peru, especially for soybeans, lithium, and copper. It's also investing in infrastructure, clean energy, and surveillance tech across the region. United States Trump-era fallout. Trump's immigration and trade rhetoric alienated many Latin American governments. U.S. influence remains strong in finance, via the IMF and World Bank, but its soft power has taken a hit. Brain the reality. Latin American countries are embracing economic multi-alignment. They're navigating U.S. China competition without ideological commitment, just economic self-interest. Globe showing Europe, Africa, Eastern Europe, between a wall and a hard place. Here, geopolitics is raw, especially post-Ukraine. United States U.S. Under Trump. Trump has expressed skepticism about NATO and EU cohesion, unnerving Eastern European states that rely on U.S. security guarantees. However, some populist leaders, like in Hungary, resonate with Trump's nationalist messaging. China's quiet moves. China uses 17+1 cooperation to build ties with Eastern Europe, especially via infrastructure and logistics. But the region is increasingly wary of Chinese strategic intent, especially after the Ukraine war reshuffled loyalties. Brain the reality. Eastern Europe is doubling down on NATO and the EU, regardless of Trump. China remains a trade partner, but strategic trust is shaky. Vertical traffic light. Bottom line, global diplomacy is not equal to loyalty, it's leverage. Across all regions, countries are hedging, not abandoning. China is seen as economically crucial but politically complex. The U.S. under Trump is unpredictable, making traditional alliances more fragile but also opening doors for new alignments. Global soft power and info wars, the digital battleground. In the new Cold War-ish dynamic between the U.S., especially under Trump, and China, influence isn't just projected through policy, it's coded, tweeted, streamed, and memed. United States. The Trump factor. Trump is the brand, not just the president. His persona resonates globally, particularly with right-wing populist movements in Europe, India, and South America. Anti-elite or anti-globalist groups who admire his anti-establishment stance. His massive social media reach, even in countries where he's not in power, gives him soft influence rivaling major governments. China's digital rise. China doesn't rely on personality cults abroad, instead, it's methodical. State-backed media like CGTN and Xinhua pump out global content in multiple languages. TikTok and other Chinese platforms are key tools in shaping global youth culture, sparking fears in the US and EU about propaganda and data control. China also engages in narrative shaping, especially around its development model, which it markets as an alternative to messy Western democracies. Performing arts. Who's winning? The US, Trump especially, dominates attention. China is steadily building trust and dependency in media, tech, and infrastructure, especially in the global south. Ballot box with ballot influence on global elections, subtle, but real. Both powers are accused of meddling, not necessarily with ballots, but with public opinion. Examples. 2024 U.S. election saw widespread disinfo campaigns, many pointing fingers at both Russian and Chinese digital operations. In Africa and Latin America, local elections have seen coordinated campaigns favoring pro-China or anti-U.S. candidates. China's approach, quiet, long-term, narrative engineering. Conclusion, no one's picking sides, they're playing their own game. Despite dramatic headlines, the world isn't abandoning China or pledging loyalty to Trump, it's navigating a complex, shifting landscape where national interests come first. Globe with Meridian's global loyalty is dead. Strategic flexibility is in. China remains indispensable economically, especially in trade, infrastructure, and tech. United States. Trump's influence is disruptive but influential, especially among populist movements and skeptical democracies. Globe showing Europe. Africa nations aren't choosing between Washington and Beijing, they're hedging, adapting, and seeking leverage from both. Brain the New World Order is less about ideology and more about survival, sovereignty, and digital dominance.